On this episode of Drug Wars, 3 separate police units in the Philippines execute risky undercover operations to bring down suspected drug dealers who specialize in meth, or shabu. After months of building trust with the targets, these undercover officers and their informants are putting their lives on the line in the hopes of stemming the flood of illegal drugs on the streets of the capital, Manila. The war on drugs is now a global fight. Drug Wars is along for the ride, capturing this high-stakes battle as it plays out on land, at sea, and in the air. From the surge in cocaine trafficking between Colombia and Guatemala, to President Duterte's controversial clampdown on dealers and users in the Philippines. As dangerous new drug routes open in North Africa and Europe, as cartels and other major criminal syndicates dig in, we take you to today's front lines. This is Drug Wars. Since President Rodrigo Duterte took power in 2016, Philippine law enforcement has become infamous for its daily, often indiscriminate, anti-narcotic raids. These highly conspicuous operations have resulted in 80,000 arrests and an estimated 3,000 deaths, and they have overwhelmingly targeted poor addicts and small-time dealers, while scarcely putting a dent in the country's drug supply. These raids justifiably grab the headlines, but there are other units quietly committed to old-fashioned police work. Instead of casting a wide and ethically dubious net, they set their sights higher up the trafficking chain. This week, 3 such teams are concluding months-long operations against suspected mid-level dealers. The draw of quick money through the drug trade has lured a cross-section of Philippine society, and these suspects work in vastly different environments for equally varied clientele. All 3 missions are buy and bust, highly risky but effective undercover operations used by police around the world to ensnare unsuspecting dealers. In the precinct of Cubao in Quezon City, Metro Manila, the first unit reviews the mechanics of the buy and bust.
Our confidential informant and officer buyer will first enter this establishment.
On such missions, undercover officers like these arrange buys with suspected dealers. This officer has been buying drugs from the target suspect for over a month, and in anticipation of a bust, she recently placed her largest order yet for shabu, or crystal meth. The technique is to gradually build trust with an alleged dealer, then set up a big purchase in which they carefully document evidence before making an arrest. One key way to build the case against suspects is to mark the bills that will be used to buy the drugs, as officers do here.
So when the poster buyer manages to buy shabu from the suspect, then that's the signal that the operatives will arrest the suspect.
They also test recording glasses that the undercover officer will use during the transaction. Since these operations are carefully controlled for evidence gathering, they're often effective, but they also bring considerable risks to police. If a dealer begins to suspect a trap, even a meticulously planned mission can turn violent or deadly. Meanwhile, in the Project 4 police station in Quezon City, Metro Manila, another undercover unit is making final preparations for a buy and bust operation of their own. Their target has been selling drugs underneath a bridge for months, usually dealing several grams per transaction. They have been tracking his work and are eager to close in. As in the Cubao precinct, officers prepare marked bills and put on recording glasses. They hope these tools will provide key evidence against the suspect after they make their arrest. The unit moves, en masse, towards the target location. These officers in the car will wait nearby until the purchase is made, then storm in to make an arrest. Their most important responsibility is to keep the undercover buyer safe. If the dealer smells something fishy, they must make sure he doesn't harm him. The officer posing as a buyer and wearing the recording glasses arrives by motorcycle. He has been purchasing drugs from the suspect, gradually building trust for almost 2 months. But tonight's purchase will be the culmination of all that work. Officers in the unmarked cars position themselves with a clear line of sight to the transaction. There are unknown civilians all around the suspect. Police must also try to keep them safe, complicating an already tricky mission. Back in Cubao, undercover officers move towards their target location, where they will surround the perimeter, ready to storm in after the transaction. The captain will control the operation from the car, a couple of blocks away. It's a busy Thursday evening. As in the Project 4 precinct, police must now be mindful of civilian safety, should the mission turn violent. The transaction is set to occur in this hotel, known to officers as one frequented by prostitutes and drug addicts. Across the street, the captain patiently surveys the scene. Officers are in position just outside the hotel. Inside, the undercover buyer awaits word from the seller. More than 2 hours have passed, and police outside begin to worry about the undercover officers inside. Did something go wrong? Has the team been ambushed? When Drug Wars returns. At this hotel in the precinct of Cubao in Metro Manila, undercover officers are in the process of executing a risky buy and bust operation. More than 2 hours have passed. But soon there is movement. An associate of the dealer arrives at the hotel. The officers move into high alert. The undercover buyer makes her final preparations. With her is another officer, posing as her boyfriend in case anything goes wrong. The captain sends a final command to his officers. It is time to execute the mission. The drugs are delivered not by the usual dealer, but by a woman acting as an intermediary. Police suspect the dealer is being extra careful given the size of the order. The transaction is completed, and officers begin to quietly move in on the hotel. They must find and arrest the dealer behind the purchase before he escapes or destroys evidence, such as the marked bills used in the transaction. Meanwhile, in the Project 4 precinct, a plainclothed officer is about to execute a buy-bust of his own on an alleged dealer that he has been buying from for over a month. As undercover backup looks on, the suspect appears to be on edge, despite his rapport with the officer posing as a buyer. He looks around repeatedly to make sure he is alone. Nevertheless, he takes the buyer's money and sends his associate to fetch the drugs. This is a key moment where the operation can still go wrong. If the suspect sees through the officer's cover, the buy could quickly get violent. Officers in the car must watch closely to protect him.
I'm still waiting or something.
For a signal?
Can you tell me what it is?
Binabot na. Dalawang subject.
The buy is complete. As the undercover officer takes off, the backup units will now move in to make arrests before the alleged dealer can escape. Back in Cubao, officers moving in after a drug purchase block off the hotel's exits and begin searching it room by room. They're looking for the alleged dealer behind the transaction, but these dark corridors leave them vulnerable to attack. The captain joins the search. His goal is to get the suspect before he finds out they're onto him, and to keep his officers out of harm's way. He stops in the room where the buy happened. He reviews Exhibit A, 9 grams of shabu, or meth, packaged for sale, plus another 11 grams in the bag.
Able to recover another items of shabu. So this is the one you buy.
The search for the suspect intensifies. Officers surround the last room down the hall. Inside, they finally find the alleged dealer and arrest him along with his associate. They must now find the currency used to buy the drugs to link him definitively to the deal. In court, their case against the suspected dealer would be significantly weakened without that key piece of evidence. Finally, the officers uncover the bills. The woman, who acted as an intermediary, is arrested as an accomplice. For a sale of this size, if convicted, the main suspect could be facing life in prison. Back in the Project 4 precinct, officers swarm the scene of an alleged drug deal. The suspect's associate flees the scene, but they arrest him in addition to the alleged dealer. Now they must find the marked bills in order to hand prosecutors the strongest case possible. They'll also search for any other drugs in his possession. The bills were hidden in the suspect's hat. Officers retrieve them and add them to the evidence pile. The alleged dealer will be charged with selling 5 grams of shabu, or crystal meth, a quantity large enough to land him 20 years in prison if convicted. Coming up next, after 2 successful buy-in busts, everything seems to go wrong for the third unit. The shifty targets constantly change their methods and stay one step ahead of the officers. Has the police cover been blown? Are they walking into a deadly trap? In a precinct in Cubao, Metro Manila, another team prepares to target a suspected pair of drug traffickers that they've contacted via a confidential informant. For these young officers, it's a clinic in proper policing.
You go with the informant, you act as the posture buyer, and you do the immediate backup.
This officer will pose as a buyer and accompany the informant to meet the dealers. Several 2-person units will provide plainclothes backup and storm in after a drug purchase is made. They agree on a signal, so officers will know when the transaction has been completed.
One will remove her ponytail.
In an upper-class shopping district in Manila, the captain meets with the informant and provides her with several large bills so that the alleged dealers can confirm that she's able to buy large quantities of drugs.
Ilagay mo lang to sa ano mo, sa tawag ito, sa bag mo para maano siya, para maniwala siyang
May pera.
may pera talaga.
Ano na yun?
Saan dyan?
Naunahan.
Saan banda? Yan o.
Yung sa may babae na kulay.
The informant calls the suspect and tells them she wants shabu, at least 10 grams worth. They agree to meet her nearby. No neighborhood in Manila is free of shabu trafficking, it seems. And unlike the dealers operating in seedier parts of town, these alleged sellers seem to prefer working in a more high-end neighborhood. The officers finalize their plans.
So what we are going to do now is to drop by first the target place, then afterwards you will drop. Diskarte mo na. Huge bulk of money to encourage the supplier that this informant is willing to buy a huge amount of shabu.
The day passes, and the suspects fail to materialize. Police worry that they were spooked and that the bust, or even worse, the informant and officer, are in danger. The operation stretches into day 2, and the undercover officers regroup. The suspects called the informant late last night and agreed to meet at a popular fast food place in Manila. The captain gives his officer and the informant all of the cash that has been marked and set aside for the mission. The 2 women will arrive at the target location by motorbike, while backup units will surround the perimeter.
they have stock, they have merchandise. If the informant, the buyer is interested in, they just call.
The captain and his units arrive outside the restaurant. The undercover buyer and the informant are already inside. The captain reads forwarded messages from the alleged dealers, who describe themselves as two women in their 50s. Just as these surroundings are unusual for a drug operation, the suspects don't fit the normal description of large quantity dealers. Officers begin to scout the area. They don't know if the women will come alone or with armed enforcers. The last thing police want is a shootout in a crowded restaurant, and so far, everything about this operation has been unpredictable. Suddenly, the undercover operatives receive a call. The suspects want to change the meeting location. Do they suspect something? Not knowing for sure, the officers now have to scramble and relocate to a new, unfamiliar location. The new rendezvous point is a smaller, less frequented venue. Alarmingly for the police, there's nowhere to station their cars. They're stuck out in the open, potential targets in an unfamiliar area. The buyers enter the agreed meeting location.
Okay, the informant texted me that the source is coming and going to the restaurant to deliver the merchandise.
The suspects could come from anywhere, and police are very uncomfortable with how exposed they are. As feared, the two suspected female dealers are approaching from the west, and they're going to walk right past the officers, who have no place to hide. Police are unsure if their cover was blown, but soon, a third person, believed to be an associate of the suspects, approaches the target location, and she will also cross the officer's path. The associate remains outside, talking on the phone and occasionally glancing in the officer's direction. Have the police blown their cover? Are the officer and the informant inside now at risk of an attack? In Manila, an undercover officer and police informant are inside a restaurant trying to execute a drug buy from two suspected dealers. But units waiting outside, left in an exposed position, fear that they might have blown the officer's cover. Minutes pass, and then one of the suspected dealers and the associate walk away from the target location, again passing the car full of police. Officers had received no signal from the inside to storm in. The captain finally gets word from the officer and the informant. There was no deal to make. They're leaving the scene empty-handed. Back in the station's recreation area, the undercover unit gets a more detailed briefing. It turns out, the suspects need more time to get the quantity of drugs the informant requested. The buy and bust waiting game continues. Day 3 of the operation begins. The last phase of a buy bust does not usually take this long, but the quantity of drugs involved has these officers determined to see it through. In all, it's 120,000 pesos, or well over 2,000 US dollars.
Sa kalsada ng driver ng taxi na yun, tapos ituturo ako sa pool. Nawalan lang talaga sila doon sa bus niya.
If the officer can't complete the transaction today, police are likely to pull the plug on the operation for her safety. Given the large quantities involved, there's the risk of raising suspicions of the supply chain, and she's already been exposed. The buy and bust will happen now or never.
Sige, punta mo lang. Kaya makita natin sila sa pagpasok.
The dealer chose another fast food restaurant for today's meeting. Taking no chances with their officer's safety, the captain's police vehicle parks right in front, but they cover the windshield to conceal themselves.
I asked them if the source is on her way. She replied, yes, sir.
Officers must wait patiently, but alertly, for the transaction to take place. If they move in too early, they could ruin the case. Too late, and the dealer could get away. The signal comes in. The officers make their move. The two women are arrested, and the marked bills are in plain sight. The informant assisting the operations walked away as planned and is waiting around the corner with the purchased drugs. With the drugs retrieved, the evidence against the dealers is overwhelming. Over 10 grams of shabu and $2,000 in marked bills. These women thought they were making a huge deal, perhaps one that could set them up for a comfortable retirement. Instead, they've been caught with enough drugs to spend the rest of their lives in prison if convicted. It's a heartbreaking reminder of how the temptation for easy money can quickly bring about ruin in the treacherous world of the global drug trade.